On the night of a full moon, a mysterious red moon shone in the captivating starry sky. Mist hung heavy in the air as a noble mansion stood tall. On such a beautiful night, it was hard to imagine the judgment being carried out against a noble family behind closed doors by the emperor, which from the outside looked more like a merciless massacre. Almost all the workers in the mansion were killed, and the owners of the house were seized amidst the loud screams and indignation of the head of the family. The knights brought the first noble to kneel before the emperor. A beautiful young girl with long pink hair, violet eyes, and relatively simple clothes looked at the emperor with a clear and fearless gaze. The tyrant of the Shubin Empire sat on the throne. He was an incredibly handsome ruler with platinum blonde hair and eyes as red as rubies. Emperor John Shubin. Next to the girl, a middle-aged man with fiery red hair was thrown to his knees. He screamed incessantly, repeating his importance. Seeing the knight's indifference to his cries, the nobleman turned to the ruler, trying to justify himself. The man's words made the girl smile because she understood that everything he said was a lie, and the emperor already knew it. Another young girl, also with fiery red hair, screamed, begging for mercy for her father. Hearing his daughter's voice, the man turned and saw that his wife and children had also been captured and were kneeling on the floor. The woman trembled with fear, and her son tried to comfort and calm his mother. Hearing the man say that this was a misunderstanding, the pink-haired girl looked at him with utter contempt. They were all members of the Hart's family, close retainers of the emperor. However, in reality, this was a family of traitors who used special skills to drive the ruler mad. The Hart's family planted nightmares in the emperor's mind, causing him to lose his sanity. Claude Hartz, the head of the family, was still trying to justify himself. He shouted at the emperor and swore, saying that he would never dare to harm the ruler. The emperor, unwilling to listen to such blatant lies any longer, impassively ordered the man's execution. He decreed that his head be hung on the castle gates and his body left to be torn apart by wild beasts, so that everyone would know the fate of a traitor. Upon hearing the order, the knights immediately began to carry it out, while the man was still trying to justify himself. Seeing this, the members of the Hart's family burst into tears, their eyes filled with terror, and began to cry out to the soon-to-be executed Claude Hartz. This noise further angered the emperor, who ordered everyone to be executed. Hearing the order, the pink-haired noble, Rena Hartz, realized that despite being an adopted daughter, she was also counted among the traitors and humbly accepted her fate. When it was the girl's turn, the knight asked the ruler what to do with her. Looking at the noble, the emperor involuntarily uttered her name. Hearing her name from the tyrant's lips, the girl was surprised and didn't even know how to react. Without a second thought, the emperor ordered her execution as well. Before the executioner's sword touched the girl's neck, the emperor ordered him to stop. He rose from his throne, walked over to Rena Hartz, and knelt on one knee before her. The ruler gazed at the girl's face, trying to recall if they had met before. To the emperor's question, Rena Hartz gave a negative answer, clarifying to herself that they had not met in this lifetime. Looking at the ruler's face, exhausted from nightmares, the girl understood that even after killing the entire Hartz family, the man before her was experiencing immense pain. Hearing the girl's answer, the emperor handed her a vial of poison. This gift from the tyrant greatly surprised the girl, as this had not happened in her past life. Seeing the noble's confusion, the ruler explained that it would save her from pain and torment. Despite the strangeness of it all, the girl thanked the emperor for the poison. She understood that this could be considered an act of mercy from the tyrant. Under the emperor's impassive gaze, the girl drank the poison. As the emperor had said, the liquid quickly spread through her body, and the girl slowly fell asleep, feeling no pain, dying at the ruler's feet. Taking one last look at the emperor, Rena Hartz felt that this death was too sweet and realized that her life had come to an end. After death, the girl woke up again in her room, back several years. Rena Hartz gradually remembered that 7 years ago, her mother had sold her to the Hartz family because she was the daughter of the illustrious Ash family, and most importantly, this was her 4th rebirth. Once upon a time, Rena lived the life of an ordinary student in Korea. However, when she first woke up in Rena Hart's body, she only remembered dying in a car accident. Although it sounded absurd, the girl was certain that this wasn't her first time in this world, and that she had lived here for 20 years. While Rena was lost in thought, a A beautiful woman with golden hair and blue eyes entered the room. It was her mother, Alice Winder. Alice was the woman who would sell the girl to the Hart's family today. Looking at her mother, Rena realized that despite the circumstances, she was somewhat happy to see her. Noticing that her daughter hadn't gotten up yet, Alice scolded her to hurry and get ready, as they had an important meeting today. Although the girl knew what was going to happen, she quickly ran to get dressed. Rena no longer saw any point in resisting. On the contrary, this time, she was even eager to go there. The carriage slowly carried the girl to her destination. Rena's mother sat in the carriage with a blank expression. It was impossible to tell what she was thinking from her face. Every time the girl was reborn, she would think about her past life. Incredibly, Rena had ended up in the world of the novel where she had died several times. The protagonist of this story was Stella, a noble woman with the ability to heal. She had been a lonely girl, ignored by everyone, including her family. However, after Stella revealed her gift to the world, she suddenly became the subject of excessive attention and threats. The novel's plot revolved around her relationship with a male protagonist, who protected his beloved Stella. Rena Winder was a major character among the extras, existing only in the dark background of the novel. In her first life, Rena, on the orders of the Hart's family, tried to kill the Emperor, but she was stopped, and the family she lived with was discovered. After that, the Emperor, bewitched by an unknown force, became obsessed and infatuated with the novel's protagonist. In her second life, the girl did everything she could to stop the Hart's family. However, upon learning of the rebirth, the family, known as the Grey Eminence, became even more enraged and more aggressive. As a result, the enraged emperor killed every member of the family. The third time, the girl simply decided to run away from this family. Everything went well until she was caught and brought before the emperor along with all the members of the Hart's family. As mentioned earlier, this time the girl poisoned herself and died again. As she rode in the carriage towards that ominous family, Rena pondered what to do this time and whether she would die again at the age of 22. For the girl, this was already her fourth life in the novel. Just as Rena was thinking that this time she hoped to avoid rebirth and live happily, the carriage stopped. Before leaving the carriage, her mother reminded the girl to cover her marked eye with her bangs. Rena immediately covered one eye with her hand and followed her mother. After the butler opened the door, he immediately turned to Alice. He asked if the girl beside her was Winderland's child. Having received an affirmative answer, the man allowed them to enter and directed them to the master's office. A middle-aged man sat at the table, and when he saw the woman, he formally greeted her. Looking at the child beside her, he asked if she was truly his brother's daughter, stating that this needed verification. According to the novel's plot, the Empire had 4 great families: Plum, Diamond, Spade, and Hearts. These families each possessed special abilities and traits, and the Hearts family's main ability was related to dreams and the mental state of people. Rena found it strange that such terrifying people possessed such an ability. Claude looked disdainfully at Alice and her daughter, continuing to insult her in his aristocratic manner, saying he didn't believe his brother would have an affair with a commoner, and even stranger, that the mother wanted to exchange the girl for money. After listening to the head of the family, the woman calmly replied that she did want to exchange the child for money, and that she had proof that the child belonged to their family. Claude incredulously demanded to see the proof. With her mother's permission, Rena released her hand, revealing her other eye. When Claude saw the mark, he was shocked. The woman placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder and proudly stated that she had heard from Winderland that their family had passed down similar pupil shapes for generations, and that as they grew older, they would develop abilities. Seeing such undeniable proof, the disgruntled man ordered the butler to bring the money. After receiving the money, Alice said goodbye and asked them to take care of her daughter. The girl understood that this was her last meeting with her mother, so the words caught in her throat. Seeing her daughter's bewildered look, the woman simply said that no matter what she wanted to say, this was her home now. However, all Rena wanted to say was that she wished her a happy life. Alice was stunned by her daughter's words and simply replied, wishing her well. Watching her mother's retreating figure, Rena recalled hearing the same news in all her previous lives. Alice had died of an incurable disease. This partially explained why her mother brought her here after their farewell. Rena reminded herself once again that this time, she wanted to live. She remembered that on this day, there were other guests at the mansion besides her. In her first life, she knew nothing about this. In her second and third, she tried to be careful, but this time, everything was different. This was the day the Heart's family began to harm the Emperor for the sake of the prince. Rina rushed to the meeting place, trying to get close to the future Emperor. The ruler's bodyguards reacted instantly, stopping the stranger. Lost in her thoughts, Rina forgot about the protection surrounding the royal. Rina tried to come up with something to explain her actions, but the moment she met John's gaze, she was completely speechless. Comparing him to her past lives, Rina realized he looked completely different now, not like the tyrant. While the girl was struggling to figure out how to extricate herself, the Heart's elder glared at her with anger. Noticing her uncle's expression, Rina quickly covered her eyes with her hand. Seeing the girl's fear and confusion, John's older brother ordered Lord Cheshire to sheath his sword and quickly reassure the girl. Looking at Terence Shubin's kind smile, Rina remembered that he was supposed to be the next emperor, but he always died before ascending the throne, and the position of first prince was always taken by John. In fact, the struggle for the throne began with the third prince, Ryo Shubin. According to the novel's plot, Ryo, despite being the eldest, was not interested in the throne. Unlike him, his mother, the second empress, Rossetti, wanted her son to ascend the throne, and it was she who used the Heart's family. Rina, having just been reborn, was terrified by the sight of the sword. Hearing the order, Lord Cheshire reluctantly sheathed his weapon. To ease the tension, another knight with bright pink hair approached, speaking to the Lord with a bright smile. Seeing this combination of two completely different people, one a hybrid creature with a cat's tail and ears, with an extremely serious expression, the other a cheerful and spontaneous young man, the girl found them strange. But her thoughts were interrupted by the first prince's question about who she was. The mistress of the house, also seeing the girl for the first time, joined in the questioning, thinking she might be a new maid. The younger members of the Heart's family also didn't understand what was happening and who this stranger was, standing before them with one hand covering her eye. Seeing all the disgruntled looks of her new family members, Rina simply replied to them in her mind that she also had no intention of becoming relatives with them, much less their half-sister. The first prince approached the girl, anxiously asking if she was hurt, and immediately received a negative answer. Rina admired the prince's kindness. Slightly opening her marked eye, the girl saw through her fingers that the demonic magic had taken root. The demonic magic of nightmares was the ability of Solane, the Heart's daughter. Today, they had given Terence another nightmare, and they planned to use the magic on John for the first time. After asking again, Prince Terence finally received an answer from Claude that this was their adopted daughter. This news was unexpected even for Claude's wife. Seizing the opportunity, Rina stole a part of the first prince's nightmare. Claude immediately asked what she was doing. The knights were also worried by the girl's incomprehensible actions. Realizing that everything was too obvious, Rina explained that there was a bug on the prince's shoulder. The head of the Heart's family hastened to apologize for his ward's behavior, and the kind prince smiled, forgiving everything. Finally out of the predicament, the girl breathed a sigh of relief. After so many years of rebirth, Rina learned that she had the ability to absorb dreams, and the black ball she took from the black stream surrounding the prince was a part of his nightmare. To help Terence, she swallowed the ball. As expected, the taste was simply awful, but it was impossible to spit it out. Otherwise, the nightmare would return to the person it was originally intended for. Rina was so engrossed that she didn't notice how intently the second prince was watching her. Noticing John approaching, the girl panicked, continuing to stop him in her mind. His facial expression gave no indication of what emotions he was experiencing. Seeing John so close, Rina only hoped she wouldn't be punished. But the second prince simply handed the girl a small red pouch. The surprised girl asked what it was, but John simply instructed his subordinate to take it and then handed the pouch to Rina. Responding to the girl's question, the prince said it tasted much better than air. The first prince didn't quite understand his younger brother's words. Although surprised, Rina realized that when she swallowed the black sphere, from the outside it probably looked like she was eating air. And the embarrassed prince hastened to add that he himself didn't like sweets, which was why he gave the cookies to her. Blushing, the girl didn't understand why the prince would bring the cookies from the palace if he didn't like them. After receiving the pouch, she sincerely thanked him. The situation was incredibly ironic. She had already thanked John twice. The first time for poison, the second for a liver. After observing him closely, the second prince suggested Terrence go home first, as he was worried about his brother's health. The first prince accepted his brother's concern and quickly agreed. Watching from the side, Rina realized that, despite not showing any particular emotion, the second prince was worried about his older brother. She didn't know it, but it seemed the two princes were close. The girl wasn't sure if Terrence could help, but she was determined to save John. She was determined to save the protagonist from the path of tyranny. Tired of constant rebirth, Rina only wished that by saving the protagonist, she could also survive. After the guests left, the furious nobleman yelled at his adopted daughter, asking why she had come there. In response, Rina lowered her head, pretending to have gotten lost while seeing her mother off and accidentally wandered there. Claude had no choice but to warn the girl to be more careful in the future. Rina simply replied that she understood. Before she could finish, Claude's wife flung the door open with a shriek, demanding to know from her husband what was going on. The man replied that he had told his wife before that there was a child who might be his brother's daughter. Then, looking at the girl, he added in a stern voice that she would work for them. Catching her uncle's questioning gaze, Rina hastily confirmed his words. After the girl left, the woman excitedly reminded her husband of the circumstances of Rina's father's death, but the nobleman interrupted his wife, replying sarcastically that the girl likely possessed incredible power they could exploit. Back in her room, the first thing Rina did was go to the bathroom. She had forgotten the side effects of consuming nightmares. They were incredibly bitter. The girl sympathetically thought about how Terrence endured it all. Thinking she couldn't do it, the girl decided to become stronger. Rina couldn't reveal her abilities, so 10 days later, she was punished and locked in the basement. After berating his adopted daughter for a long time, the wicked nobleman turned around and left, slamming the door. In fact, everything was going according to Rina's plan. She was ready to fight. Not getting what he wanted from the girl, her uncle forbade her from calling them family, ordering her to address him as master, and also commanded her to change her hair color. After that, thanks to the Hart's family's help, rumors spread everywhere that their adopted daughter was ill and therefore didn't attend various events. A year had passed since the girl dyed her hair, covered one eye with an eye patch, and became an ordinary maid. Passing by, Rina saw the head maid loudly scolding a worker who had accidentally dropped a dessert meant for the young mistress, noting that the boy looked rather clumsy. She offered to help, and Martha, the head maid, realizing she was short on time, agreed to her offer and left. After Martha left, the boy thanked Rina. The girl saw that something was tangled in the employee's hood and tried to help. The hood accidentally slipped off, revealing the boy's face. Seeing rabbit ears, Rina was very surprised, as the Hart's family had never had demi-humans. The embarrassed boy quickly covered his head with the hood again. Seeing the boy's reaction, Rina remembered that in this world, such creatures held the lowest status, so they hid their true nature. The girl hastily apologized and promised not to tell anyone. But the boy replied that everything was fine, as many people already knew. Blushing like a tomato, the boy suggested Rina speak freely with him, as they were both workers. The girl agreed and gave her name. In response, the boy also introduced himself, saying his name was Maximus. For the first time in a while, Rina had the opportunity to go out, and she decided to use this chance to begin implementing her plan. Since she was known as a blonde, eye-patch-wearing maid in the Hart's family, she had to look different when visiting the guild. So as not to be recognized as a maid, she removed her wig and headband, deciding to show her true face. Seeing her with the cake, the bar patrons began to tease her, saying this wasn't a place for children and asking if the cake was for them. Rina silently walked to the counter and said in a confident voice that she was a customer, here to see the guild leader of the Black Heart Guild, Rosalyn Hale. Hearing this, everyone was taken aback, unable to believe their ears. A woman behind the counter turned to the girl and told her to leave, because she didn't take money from children. But Rina didn't back down, saying she could offer something more valuable than money, and casually asked if she had nightmares. The woman asked in surprise how the girl knew about that. Rina knew about it from her past life, but of course she couldn't say that, so she replied that it didn't matter. The girl looked directly into Rosella's eyes and offered to rid her of the nightmares. The guild leader's aides didn't trust the stranger and angrily suggested throwing the girl out. But contrary to her subordinate's advice, Rosella decided to ask what she wanted in return. Rina calmly replied that she wanted all the information related to the Imperial Palace. Although the request was dangerous, As Rina expected, the guild leader agreed, as her mental state was already on the verge of collapse. After the conversation, Rosella asked how she could contact her. After a moment of thought, Rina decided to use an alias instead of her own name, introducing herself using her deceased mother's name, Alice. For several years, everything went as usual. According to the guild's information, Prince Tyrant had been in a coma for 3 years. At this time, Prince John ascended the throne and prepared for war. However, there was no news of John going insane. Apparently, Rina had succeeded in thwarting the Hart's family's plans, because this life was different from the previous one. 6 months later, the girl turned 22. The girl smiled happily, anticipating that if all went well, she would be free in 6 months and live a happy life. But as it turned out, things weren't as rosy as they seemed. During a chance encounter with the Emperor, Rina saw him shrouded in a thick black aura and looking exhausted. The girl was shocked because the information she had received previously was completely different. To confirm everything, she called out to the Emperor. Hearing the voice, the man turned around, wondering who called him and why. Looking at John again, Rina was convinced that he was completely consumed by nightmares. The girl stared at the man in front of her for a long time, intently. The Emperor didn't understand what was happening, and seeing that the stranger was just silent, he decided to leave. But Rina couldn't let him go so easily, because at this rate, he would soon lose his mind. Finally, unable to think of a better way, she grabbed the Emperor and asked if he believed in miracles. Hearing this question, the Emperor looked at the girl as if she were crazy. To prove she wasn't talking nonsense, Rina continued, asking affirmatively if the man hadn't been able to sleep properly lately, and if his mind was becoming increasingly hazy. The girl described in detail everything that was happening to the Emperor, which greatly surprised the man. The shocked Emperor, wanting only to get rid of the nightmares and headaches, decided to ask the stranger if all these symptoms would disappear if he believed in miracles. It turned out that in any world, resisting belief in miracles is difficult. After entering the guild with John, Rina walked to the counter and asked Benjamin to use an empty room, specifically pointing out that a soundproof room would be best. While the administrator was still confused, the girl took the room key herself. She hurriedly pushed the Emperor towards the room, finally warning Benjamin that they would be occupying the furthest room and that no one should approach it during that time. The girl's words sounded somewhat suggestive, so the administrator hastily warned them not to do anything strange in the room. Hearing this, the girl blushed like a tomato and loudly retorted that they wouldn't do anything like that. They finally reached the room. Strangely, the first thing the Emperor asked after entering the room was whether the girl was planning to do anything strange, which greatly embarrassed Rina. After having the man sit in a chair, the girl began to inquire about his current condition. To gain the Emperor's trust, Rina had him close his eyes, then gently touched his forehead and began to slowly release her power. Under the influence of Rina's power, John quickly fell asleep. He hadn't slept properly in a long time. To provide more effective help, Rina decided on a different approach than removing the nightmare sphere and swallowing it. She gently touched the Emperor's hand with her lips, channeling her ability towards him. After a while, the Emperor opened his eyes, not even understanding when he had fallen asleep. Coming to his senses, the ruler was surprised to find himself sleeping on a strange woman's lap. The girl's actions seemed extremely strange to him, and his own actions were completely inexplicable. After a good sleep, the ruler's mood noticeably improved. While the Emperor was immersed in thoughts about what had happened and the mysterious stranger, Rina also opened her eyes, smiling gently and apologizing for not waking him sooner. Finally fully awake, the Emperor sat up and couldn't believe his ears when he heard he had only slept for 10 minutes. In such a short time, he had managed to fall asleep and feel incredibly well-rested. In response, the girl suggested with a kind smile that he get more rest like this in the future. However, no matter how hard the Emperor tried, he couldn't rest properly because as soon as he closed his eyes, terrible, nightmarish visions would appear. Those visions were driving him mad. For the first time in a long time, the ruler was able to rest comfortably, and it was all thanks to the stranger. The shy girl humbly replied that she just wanted to show him what a miracle was. The Emperor said he had never heard of such a thing, and Rina hastily said she would gradually guide him through it. After listening to the stranger's explanation, the ruler decided to look up information about this phenomenon. Back at the palace, After their conversation, the girl smiled and suggested they meet again next time, if possible. Hearing this offer, the emperor realized he looked even more tired than he thought. To his surprise, the ruler found he didn't want to let the suspicious woman go just like that, and offered to schedule a meeting in advance. Not wanting to reveal any information about herself, Rina refused, saying that if they were destined to meet, it would happen. After the girl left, his subordinate approached the emperor. He wanted to know if everything was all right. The ruler answered in the affirmative and, in turn, asked him for his opinion on what he had seen. The rabbit-eared aide replied that the woman possessed magical power, but it wasn't demonic or anything of the sort. Hearing his subordinate's answer, the emperor ordered a thorough investigation into the Blackheart Guild and information about the girl. The ruler didn't believe in fate, but since he needed this woman, he was willing to believe in anything. Changing back into her maid uniform, Rina still didn't understand when the curse had befallen Yenning. Rina understood that in this life, besides eliminating nightmares, she might possess another ability, and she had a distinct advantage because her body was unaffected by the abilities of others. She could also dispel other people's magic by absorbing it, but the side effects were as strong as absorbing nightmares. But she couldn't reveal her secret, so no one should see that uniquely marked eye. Thus, Rina secretly intervened in the Hart's family affairs as a maid, but it was clear that she hadn't been able to fully block Solene's power. Just as the girl was thinking about her next move, she ran into the young miss. Apparently, Solane wasn't in a good mood and responded to her greeting curtly. To avoid provoking the young miss further, Rina hurried to leave, but Solane stopped the maid, unexpectedly asking if she had spoken with her father. Rina was surprised by the question. The young miss clarified that she was referring to their secret conversation. Hearing these words, Rina remembered that her uncle often called her to his office, but they hadn't discussed anything serious. To avoid misunderstandings, she quickly gave a negative answer. But the young miss wasn't in the mood for a peaceful conversation. She yelled at the girl because she didn't believe her. At that moment, the young master intervened. Snow Hearts was a complex individual. It was difficult to understand what he was thinking. He was the eldest son of the Hearts family. In her past life, Snow had been quiet and inconspicuous, but in this life, his behavior was very strange. Not receiving an answer from his sister, Snow, with a sly smile, told Rina that her father was looking for her. Hearing this, the girl was very surprised. And not just her. Solane rushed to her brother, asking if their father was looking for her too. Receiving a negative answer, the young miss, to avoid further bruising her ego, hurried away, but not before scolding the maid once more. Seeing Solane's behavior, Rina guessed that she was most likely just jealous of her father. After his sister left, Snow advised the girl to try to avoid Solane. Her brother explained the reason for his words, adding only that it was currently exam time, which was why Solane was so agitated. The mention of the exam greatly surprised Lena, as she knew nothing about it. Even in her past lives, this hadn't happened. Seeing Lena's confused look, Snow asked with a malicious smile if she wanted to know what was going on. Although the girl was unpleasant about talking with the young master, her curiosity got the better of her, and she nodded in response. Then Snow said that a few days ago, Claude Hearts had gathered all of his children and said that they had to take an exam to determine who would be the next head of the family. Lena was surprised by this news, but didn't show it. She remembered that this hadn't happened in her past lives, when Rune had been appointed the heir. Snow continued, saying that he thought their father would most likely make a decision based on their skills, and currently, Solane had poor control over her abilities, hence her constant irritability. Hearing this, Lena realized that it was her fault. After finishing the story, Snow added with a laugh that he wasn't interested in becoming the head of the family, but the whole struggle seemed very amusing to him. When her cousin asked for her support, Lena silently nodded in agreement, not understanding which of this guy's words were true and which were false. Eager to end the conversation, the girl quickly said goodbye and headed towards the head of the family. She hadn't even taken a step when Snow abruptly grabbed her hand and pulled her towards him, saying in a low, icy voice that slaves and animals shouldn't be friends. Hearing these words, the girl realized that this was about her and Maximus. Lena pretended in a panic that she didn't understand what he was talking about. At his stepsister's reaction, Snow grinned, saying that he was only saying this for her own good. Leaving there, the girl was very scared, as this situation was extremely strange. Analyzing her experiences from past lives, Lena understood that this life was the most normal of them. Since the Emperor hadn't gone mad yet, she hadn't been imprisoned, and the Hearts family was acting too slowly. Returning to the Imperial Palace, Yinning continued to deal with state affairs. The emperor and his aide Cheshire discussed holding a celebration, or rather, the ruler wanted to postpone or cancel this event. The aide believed that this would cause not only outrage and discontent among the common people, but also dissatisfaction among the nobles. Having listened to Cheshire's arguments, in order to legally and with the least resistance cancel the celebration, the emperor decided to start a war, as then people would have no time for festivities. But even for this proposal of Yinning's, the quick-witted aide found an answer, saying that there were no unconquered territories nearby. Then the emperor put forward his last argument against the aide, recalling that thanks to him, orcs could become knights, and as the ruler, he could do whatever he wanted. However, Cheshire responded to this with dignity, saying that he handled his own affairs just fine. 15 days had passed since the emperor had been able to sleep peacefully. He didn't have nightmares and didn't suffer from insomnia, but his instincts kept him awake, which made it easier for him to throw himself into war again. People called the emperor's condition Celine's curse, as this ailment was first discovered in the emperor's mother, Empress Celine. After much torment, she passed away, and then the emperor's older brother, Tyrant, also died from the same illness. After his brother's death, the ruler decided that he would be next. Unfortunately, he wasn't mistaken. But despite the fact that the disease was called a curse, no signs of a curse were found. No one could figure out how or why this ailment appeared. However, that stranger was able to briefly deliver the emperor from his nightmares. The ruler looked forward to meeting this mysterious woman, as he yearned to once again experience that calm, short sleep and gentle atmosphere. It was a clear, sunny day outside, but despite the good weather, the young lady's mood soured once again. This time, she scolded her brother. Rune sarcastically pointed out to his sister that she still hadn't learned how to properly use her abilities. Deep down, Rosalyn understood that her brother was right, so she couldn't argue back. In the midst of the quarrel, Lena entered the dining room, not understanding what was happening here, as she had been ordered to change and immediately come to the table. After the girl entered, Snow and Claude also came in, and seeing the situation, the head of the family immediately ordered everyone to calm down and sit down. Lena was at a loss, not knowing what to do or how to react. Her uncle, in a commanding tone, called her to the table. The girl reluctantly obeyed, although she still didn't understand why she had been called here. All the members of the Friendly Hearts family gathered at the table. In such an atmosphere, Lena felt extremely uncomfortable. Rosalyn was the first to break the silence. She asked her father why he had come in with Snow. Her brother Rune also joined in the questioning. To the siblings' displeasure, Rune responded with a smile, claiming he and his father hadn't discussed anything important. Claude then clarified that he'd called Snow in merely to discuss the upcoming ball at the Imperial Palace. Lena remained silent, observing the scene and drawing her own conclusions. Claude added that the children needn't worry, as the exam would be fair. His last remark surprised Lena, as Claude directed his gaze towards her while saying it. After the tense dinner, Lena could only hope his look didn't portend anything bad. Analyzing the information she'd received, Lena realized these exams were somehow connected to Yinning. A sense of foreboding washed over her. She felt that something would happen in this life. At the first opportunity, Lena went to the guild, seeking clarification on the information they had provided over the past 7 years. The administrator immediately replied that they were professionals in their respective fields and only provided verified information, but Lena still felt they were omitting something. Unable to explain the basis of her suspicion, Lena decided to set it aside for now. However, she still couldn't understand how the Hearts family had implanted nightmares into the Emperor's mind if, according to the information received, Rosalyn and Yinning had no connection, thus preventing her from using her abilities. Deciding to approach the matter from a different angle, she asked the administrator if he remembered the man who had been with her last time. He replied that he did, but the man hadn't returned since. Lena found this hard to believe, as she had felt watched ever since that day. Fortunately, thanks to the Hearts family's power, she was highly sensitive to such things and could also conceal her presence from the minds of others. Lena was surprised to hear that Yinning hadn't returned to the guild since then, as she was certain he would come looking for her. After her inquiry, The administrator became curious about the man's identity, but before Lena could answer, someone entered the bar. The unexpected guest was the Emperor. Upon entering, he walked silently towards Lena. The administrator, seeing the unfamiliar intruder, grew apprehensive, but Lena quickly reassured him that everything was all right. The long-awaited meeting had finally arrived. Now Lena and Yinning stood face to face, mere inches apart. Suddenly, the Emperor grasped her hand. The ruler's action startled Lena. Looking directly into her eyes, Yinning repeated her words. If they were destined to meet again, they would. Having reiterated her words, the Emperor added that fate had brought them together once more and asked for her help in falling asleep again. Lena agreed, and they retreated to a private room. The Emperor pressed a kiss to her hand, and Lena once again directed her abilities towards him. But this time the nightmare was considerably stronger, causing her vision to blur. Once again, under the influence of her magic, the man quickly fell asleep. Looking at the Emperor, Lena realized the nightmares had intensified and the ruler's condition had worsened. While he slept, she decided to examine him more closely, suspecting he might harm himself. During her examination, the Emperor awoke, his eyes snapping open. Lena jumped back in surprise, as not even 10 minutes had passed. She hastily explained the situation to avoid any misunderstanding, saying she had simply noticed a wound and decided to take a closer look. But the Emperor seemed dazed, silently staring at Lena with a strange look. It was a look she knew all too well, the crazed look of a bloodthirsty tyrant, one she couldn't forget. Without warning, the Emperor reached out and gripped Lena's throat. She reacted swiftly, breaking free from his grasp. Although Lena hadn't wanted to resort to this method, she decided to use it, as her abilities were more effective with closer contact. This time, the nightmare was even darker, and the desire that plagued the Emperor was the desire for death. The man's state evoked genuine pity in Lena. She understood his struggles better than anyone. Unfortunately, this was all she could currently do for her ruler. As the tension subsided, she realized what she had done. Lena hastily justified her actions to the now sleeping Emperor. Sitting beside the calmed ruler, Lena realized she hadn't been afraid, even when the crazed Emperor had tried to kill her. Recalling the past, she speculated that perhaps it was because Yinning had died several times that he was now plagued by this compulsive desire for suicide. Lena watched the peacefully sleeping Emperor, pondering what sort of ending awaited them in this life. Lost in thought, the girl didn't even notice herself begin to stroke the Emperor's hair. In that moment, Lena thought only of Yinning's soft hair, forgetting all matters of importance. After a while, the Emperor awoke. Noticing this, the girl smiled and asked him how he slept. It took the Emperor a few minutes to fully wake up. Having regained his senses, Yinning sat up and asked how much time had passed. Lena calmly replied that he had slept for 30 minutes this time. Noticing the Emperor's gaze, the girl inquired as to the reason. In response, Yinning asked the stranger's name. Answering the question, Lena gave her alias, Alice. Hearing this name instead of her real one, Yinning found it strange. The Emperor thought that the name didn't suit the girl at all. To change the subject, Alice asked the man's name in return, even though she already knew it. To Lena's surprise, the Emperor didn't hesitate to give his real name. Dumbfounded, the girl decided to ask about the alias, but the Emperor didn't understand the reason for the question. To avoid unnecessary problems, Lena suggested that the Emperor come up with an alias. She explained to the ruler that it was better to use an alias in such places. After listening to the girl, the Emperor replied that perhaps Yinning was his alias, while observing Alice's reaction, but the girl didn't betray that she knew the truth. Unable to get a reaction from his interlocutor, the Emperor relented, allowing Alice to call him Jay. Hearing this, Lena repeated the Emperor's alias. The ruler, who hadn't been addressed like that in a long time, was pleased. After a brief conversation, Alice noted that the Emperor's condition had improved somewhat. At the same time, Jay asked Lena to communicate with him informally. Lena was shocked by the Emperor's proposal, and the girl politely refused. But the Emperor was adamant. Alice was about to refuse again, but couldn't think of a good reason. Seeing Yinning's pure and direct gaze, she relented, agreeing to fulfill the Emperor's wish and address him informally as Jay. This noticeably improved the ruler's mood. Having finished with the pleasantries, Yinning moved on to another important matter, inviting Alice to work for him. The girl was speechless with surprise. Seeing Alice's confusion, Jay promised her a generous salary and to ensure her miracle became a faith. But not having received an answer, the Emperor also promised to fulfill any of her desires. Of all the conditions, this was perhaps the most attractive to Alice, as she desperately wanted to ask the ruler not to kill her when he executed the entire family. But before they could finish their conversation, someone entered the room. It was Rosella. Having heard that something interesting was happening in her guild, she decided to take a look. Entering the room and hearing only part of the conversation, due to incorrect judgment, she mistook it for a marriage proposal and, misunderstanding the question, answered for Alice, saying that she was a very important part of their family. The Emperor did not correct the guild master's mistake, only replying that the question was not addressed to her, but to Alice. The tension between them rose sharply. Noticing the dangerous atmosphere between Rosella and Jay, Alice tried to calm them down, but they told her not to interfere. As a compromise, the guild master offered to become a liaison between Yinning and Alice, suggesting that the Emperor contact the girl through her if necessary. Jay was clearly not happy with this option, but before he could object, Rosella continued, pointing out that if Yinning tried to meet with Alice secretly, he would never see her again. After the negotiations ended, Lena, already changed into her maid uniform, hurried home. Along the way, she continued to admire Rosella's diplomatic skills. During the negotiations, the guild master had sold the Emperor a communication device for 10,000 gold coins. But for Lena, it was simply unbelievable how quickly the Emperor agreed to the purchase. Having spent such a large sum, after a tiring day, the girl finally returned home and was about to go to her room to rest. However, for some reason, Snow was waiting for her at the door. Seeing the guy, a surprised Lena asked the reason for his arrival, but the answer turned out to be even stranger, as he had come to offer himself as an escort for the palace ball. This was the first time the girl had heard about the palace ball. Before Lena could digest the information she had received, Rosalyn and Rune suddenly appeared behind her. Not understanding how long these two had been eavesdropping, Lena tried to explain. Snow's train of thought had been difficult to understand before. You never knew what he was thinking, but now not only was he acting strange, but the entire family's behavior was extremely unusual. It was absurd that the Claude Hearts family was starting to treat Lena as one of their own. Lena refused her stepbrother's offer, citing her lack of an invitation. Snow didn't give up either. He came up with a solution, inviting Lena to be his partner at the ball. It was perplexing that this guy, who had always ignored her, was being so persistent. The atmosphere felt ominous, and Lena had to agree to consider it. Before leaving, Snow gave her an invitation to the ball, addressed to Lena Hearts, and the most unbelievable thing was, he relayed his father's wishes, saying that Claude Hearts suggested Lena attend the ball. The girl was confused. She didn't understand what Claude was trying to do, as this had never happened in any of her past lives. Although Lena was forced to agree to consider the invitation, Snow's glance still made her hold her breath. She seriously considered refusing, but she was afraid of the consequences. Lost in thought, she bumped into Rosalyn. The young lady also suggested, in a commanding tone, that they go to the Imperial Palace Ball together. The girl was stunned by the suggestion. Rosalyn, with a sweet and kind smile, gave a reasonable explanation as to why they should be together. The smile of the always angry and aggressive young lady sent shivers down Lena's spine. As the young mistress bragged and talked about the benefits of accepting her offer, Lena hurried away, finally saying she would consider it. Lena finally managed to escape Rosalyn's pursuit. Before she could breathe a sigh of relief, she ran into the second son of the Hearts family. Seeing Rune, the startled girl thought that now he would also invite her to the ball. Strangely, she guessed correctly. He also started talking about the ball. Before Rune could finish, the girl turned around and ran away. Lena's actions shocked the young master. Having finally gotten rid of those irrelevant people, the girl screamed that they were all crazy. Seeing the girl like this, Maxie handed Lena some water. After thanking him, the maid drank a glass of water. Noticing his friend's strange behavior, the boy inquired about her condition. Lena told her friend that she had been invited to the Imperial Palace Ball. However, the boy still didn't understand why she was so worried. What the girl was more concerned about was not the ball itself, but why Claude Hearts was so insistent on sending her to this ball. In this situation, Maxie couldn't help much either. His friend Lena had to attend the ball, while Maxie couldn't go. But Lena was happy for her friend's concern and sincerely thanked him. She couldn't go against Claude Hartz's wishes, and to avoid any unforeseen circumstances, she needed a companion. However, she didn't want to go with any of those three. Suddenly, the girl's face contorted in a fit of discomfort. Seeing Lena's expression, her friend became worried again. Suddenly, the maid vomited an unknown substance. The girl quickly realized what it was and hurried to reassure her panicked friend. Though the scene was unseemly, Lena's body was healthy. The girl was confident in her health, as she had recently seen a doctor who said she had no illnesses. Obviously, after witnessing that scene, Maxie was still worried. Lena smiled and quickly reassured her friend. The next day, Jay and Alice met for the third time. After using her power, she once again put the Emperor to sleep. There used to be some awkwardness between them, but now, the man who had caused Lena's death multiple times was snoring peacefully on her shoulder like a cat. After a while, Yinning woke up and stared intently at Alice. He thought her eyes looked unhealthy. Jay asked in a worried tone if Alice was all right. Lena was happy to feel Yinning's concern. So as not to bother the ruler, the girl replied that everything was fine, that it was just the result of lack of sleep, but she didn't say the reason for her exhaustion. Suddenly, Lena noticed scars on the Emperor that he had in her past life, and she wondered how he got them. Yinning replied in a calm tone that he tied himself up when he slept, as if it were a matter of course. Lena didn't expect such an answer. Noticing the girl's confusion, Yinning explained that it was to avoid accidentally killing anyone, but his condition had significantly improved since they met. After listening to the Emperor's story, Lena made up her mind that she would do everything possible to help this ruler. At the end of the meeting, as a farewell, Alice invited Jay to meet more often. Yinning certainly wished for that too, but his status didn't allow him to leave the Imperial Palace more frequently. Suddenly, he remembered the ball at the palace and invited Alice to attend as well. The girl refused, as this was already the fourth invitation she had received. The Emperor, not expecting to be rejected, was displeased by her answer. Yinning's pitiful look made the girl feel ashamed. In return, she suggested they attend the Foundation Day celebrations together. Although the girl assumed the busy Emperor would politely decline when she suggested they walk together, Yinning unexpectedly agreed very quickly. Such a swift acceptance took her by surprise. After bidding farewell to the Emperor, Lena returned to her room and began meticulous preparations for the ball. The first thing she considered was the ball gown. To make the preparations easier, Lena chose the resourceful Rosalyn, her stepsister, who had already begun preparing for the ball. Rosalyn enthusiastically picked out a dress and shoes for Lena. During this time, Lena continued to avoid her stepbrothers and decided to keep her bandages on. Lena's stepsister also lent her a mask for the evening. However, another serious question remained. Would the Emperor recognize Lena when he saw her at the ball? As the cheerful Rosalyn selected outfits, Lena consoled herself that if she avoided meeting the Emperor, he wouldn't recognize her, as she would be wearing a wig and headdress. The girl desperately prayed in her heart that nothing would happen at the ball. A few days later, the day of the ball arrived. The young lady, dressed in a chic lavender dress, as fastidious as ever, continued to complain incessantly to her stepsister, Lena, despite being the one who had invited her. Lena, dressed in a lovely pink dress, was bewildered by her capricious attitude. The magical night of the ball had arrived. This was Lena's first time at the Imperial Palace. All the high-ranking nobles were gathered within the palace walls. Lena and Rosalyn entered the palace together, like family. Although everyone's faces were partially concealed, Lena still recognized some people. The girl silently followed her stepsister, listening to her talk about the ball and instructing her on how to introduce herself more naturally. Despite the masks concealing their faces, Emperor Yinning could be recognized at a glance. Lena silently admired the ruler's handsome features. However, from the aura surrounding him, it was clear that he didn't want to be there. Comparing tonight to the description in the novel, Lena noted that, according to the plot, it was on this very night that the protagonist first attracted everyone's attention. The main difference was that the ball in the book was not a masquerade. According to the original story, at some point, a girl fainted. Seeing this, the protagonist helped her with her healing abilities. It was the first time Stella used her powers, which aroused everyone's interest, especially the Emperor's. It was the power of healing that piqued the ruler's interest. Analyzing the scene from the novel, Lena thought that, for Yinning, it might have been love at first sight. At that moment, Rosalyn was looking at something intently. Lena tried to figure out what the young lady was focused on. However, before she could get an answer, another scene caught her attention. Claude Hartz and his sons approached the Emperor. What was surprising was not only that they approached so closely, but that they went there without Rosalyn. This was also completely unexpected for the girl. She couldn't understand how her father and brothers could leave her alone. Lena guessed it was because Rosalyn couldn't fully demonstrate her abilities. Suddenly, the young lady turned to Lena and asked if she knew what Claude and his sons were discussing. Without including her, the girl replied that she didn't know, but this answer didn't satisfy Rosalyn. She excitedly demanded the truth, while Lena replied in a calm tone that she wasn't lying and advised her to lower her voice. The young lady's screams attracted everyone's attention. Despite their faces being covered, Rosalyn continued to shout the girl's name. Any attempt by Lena to calm her stepsister down only angered her more. The poor girl stood dumbfounded, not even understanding why they were yelling at her. Rosalyn finally came to her senses, leaving her glass with Lena, and decided to go out for some air. Lena watched the departing young lady, not understanding what had happened. After alarming everyone, the hysterical woman just left, leaving Lena alone under the gaze of those around her. The girl tried her best not to attract attention, praying that no one would speak to her. Meanwhile, she felt as if Yinning was watching her. To get rid of this feeling, Lena decided to move to a different spot, but before she could take a step, she felt a wave of dizziness. The next second, she lost consciousness. The girl fainting attracted everyone's attention. However, despite the large crowd around her, no one rushed to help. While everyone was in a flurry, Stella rushed to Lena's side to help. Everything unfolded according to the novel. The protagonist offered assistance to a girl who had fainted at the ball. Removing her mask, Stella BRYGHD inquired after the stranger's well-being. Half opening her eyes and looking directly into the protagonist, Lena realized that perhaps she was the girl from the novel. Lena forced her eyes open, trying to retrace her steps in her mind to figure out why she had fainted. When she finally regained consciousness, she was quite surprised by her condition. Stella gently stroked Lena's hair, smiling as she expressed her relief that the girl had awakened. Lena was delighted by the care, as it had been a long time since she had felt the warmth of another's touch. The novel's protagonist told Lena that a room had been provided in the palace for them to rest. After sitting down, Lena thanked Stella for her help. Stella stood and introduced herself, stating her name. Lena wanted to respond in kind, but suddenly realized she could see clearly. Upon this realization, she noticed her bandages were gone. Lena hadn't bothered with an eye patch, as it was merely something to cover her pupils. Noticing the girl's confusion, Stella assumed she was looking for her mask, while Lena covered her eyes. Stella asked if she was from the Hartz family, as she had noticed the pupil. A young nobleman, Kael, joined the conversation, wanting to confirm if she was the adopted daughter the Hartz family had introduced 7 years prior. The man's appearance was unexpected. Lena hadn't expected to meet one of the main male characters of the novel, a young master from the prominent Spade family, renowned for his knightly prowess. Noticing the girl's bewilderment, Stella told Kael to soften his expression, lest he frighten her. Watching the interaction between the two, although Lena was meeting them for the first time and didn't know what kind of relationship they had, she remembered from the book that they were in love. Feeling awkward in this atmosphere, the young lady was already considering her escape routes. Finishing her conversation with her friend, Stella turned to Lena again, asking if she was a member of the Hartz family. In response to the question, the girl stated her full name, Lena Hartz, and thanked the lady for her assistance. Stella hurriedly said that it was Kael who had brought the girl into the room. She had merely been standing there. Hearing this, Lena politely thanked him as well. Beside her, the girl noticed a soiled handkerchief that looked quite expensive. Noticing the handkerchief, Lena hurriedly inquired if she was the reason it was soiled. After visually assessing the handkerchief's worth, Lena offered to compensate for it or buy a new one, but the kind protagonist refused with a smile, saying they were happy to help. Seeing his girlfriend's charming smile, the fellow jealously asked her to smile like that only for him. While Stella still didn't understand the reason for such a request, Lena immediately sensed the atmosphere between them. After the conversation ended, the novel's protagonist and her friend left. Lena bid farewell to her new acquaintances. After the two left, the girl smiled and began to ponder whether the reason for her sudden fainting spell was the alcohol, and if so, who might have drugged it. Naturally, the first and primary suspect was Rosalyn, But first, the girl decided to return to the ball. Although Lena hurried back to the ballroom, she got lost while leaving the room and simply wandered around the palace for a while. As luck would have it, there wasn't a soul around. Had the girl known this, she would have left with Stella. Finally, she heard voices. Lena followed the sound and saw the Emperor and his knights. The situation looked quite serious. The knights were supporting the Emperor, trying to calm him down. Suddenly, one of the knights accidentally dropped a syringe, which rolled to the girl's feet. Picking up the vial, the girl heard that it was a sedative. Noticing the noblewoman, the knights loudly asked who she was. At this moment, Yinning also noticed the lady. Seeing this, the knights hurriedly ordered the girl to leave. But before Lena could react, she fell into the Emperor's grasp. Yinning pinned the girl to the floor and gripped her throat. It was clear with just one glance that nightmares had completely consumed Jay. The situation was extremely dire. Lena might die again. But strangely, the young lady wasn't afraid now. She reached out and touched the Emperor's cheek. Lena, with gentle words, tried to rouse Yinning. Struggling to her feet and to better utilize her ability, she kissed the ruler full on the lips. Taking advantage of the Emperor's shock, she grabbed the syringe and injected herself. The man immediately fell asleep, and the worried knights rushed to the noblewoman's side. Only upon hearing their voices did Lena remember she and the Emperor were not alone. One of the knights approached her, asking if she was all right. It was a beast man with rabbit ears, looking very much like Lena's friend. She immediately noticed the resemblance to Maxie. The knight tried to ascertain which family the noblewoman belonged to, but Lena was interested in a completely different question. Without hesitation, she asked if the knight had a younger brother. The question was strange, but no matter how she looked at it, they really did resemble each other. To her surprise, however, she received a negative answer. The knight had no family, and he had always been alone. After answering, the knight asked in return why she was interested in that. To the knight's question, Lena honestly replied that she simply knew someone who looked very similar. After an awkward conversation, the girl said goodbye and hurried away. The noblewoman left without answering the knight's question about which family she belonged to. Lena was lucky to run into Solange. Strangely, Solange hadn't left her stepsister to go home alone. However, upon seeing the girl, the young lady immediately began to scold her, accusing her of first fainting and then getting completely lost. Having said everything she wanted to say, Solange got into the carriage. Lena had no choice but to apologize and make the excuse that this was her first ball. On the way home, the girl kept wondering who had poisoned the drink. Did they want to harm her or Solange? It was logical to assume that the Bless family also had a motive to arrange this, to help Stella demonstrate her power. Arriving home, the exhausted girl headed to her room to sleep. Unfortunately, on the way she ran into Snow, who feigned concern and inquired about Lena's well-being. The boy reached out as if to touch the girl, checking her temperature. Startled, Lena flinched and abruptly pushed his hand away. Realizing what she had just done, the girl quickly apologized and replied that she was fine. The boy's hand was bright red from being swatted. Lena anxiously awaited the young master's reaction, but Snow simply said he was glad to hear she wasn't sick and was saddened by such treatment. Feeling guilty for her behavior towards her stepbrother, Lena apologized again. Upon hearing the apology, the boy didn't accept it, but instead asked if it was sincere. Despite her inner voice screaming no, Lena's lips formed the word yes. The girl's response brought a smile to the boy's face. He pressed Lena against the wall, asking her to give him some time. The girl was too stunned to speak. Too many strange things had happened throughout the day. The girl hoped at least to get a good night's sleep, but it was not to be. It turned out that the life of a supporting character was much more complicated and unpredictable than the life of the protagonist. Under the circumstances, Lena could only nod and avert her gaze. The next day, while at the guild, Barton noticed the girl's anxiety and asked what was wrong. Alice walked up to the counter and asked the administrator if he knew the Imperial Palace's knight. Mela had been haunted by the resemblance to Maxie from that night. Moreover, in the story, Emperor Yinning didn't have any close mixed blood associates. Hearing that the knight served in the Imperial Palace, Barton said it would be difficult to obtain information about him. Then the girl replied in an indifferent tone that everything was fine. Since their guild couldn't get information about the Emperor's confidant, there was nothing to be done. The provocation worked perfectly. The administrator hurried to stop Alice as she was leaving. Lena continued to provoke the man, starting to talk loudly about perhaps it being worth contacting. tempting. Another guild. As expected, the incitement worked wonders. The man immediately promised on behalf of the guild to obtain all the necessary information. Having easily achieved her goal, Alice thanked Bolton and said she would wait. Unexpectedly, the guild master also came to the tavern. Rosella was with Benjamin, and they were about to go somewhere. When she noticed Lena, she invited her to join them. Rosella was delighted to see Alice and insisted on inviting her to join them for the festival, even promising to treat her to something delicious. But before they could finish their conversation, Alice received a call. Upon answering, the Emperor's voice immediately came from the other end of the device, requesting a meeting with the girl. It was strange, but Yinning wasn't even interested in knowing who he was talking to, immediately demanding to see Alice. Hearing Lena's voice, Yinning hesitated in surprise, but immediately asked if she had time to meet. Alice answered affirmatively, as they had already agreed to spend the festival together. The girl's answer pleased the Emperor, as he truly wanted to see Alice. Yinning's joyful and straightforward manner of speaking shocked and bewildered everyone present. Lena decided to confirm the meeting time. After ending the conversation, Yinning informed Chizia that he would be leaving for a while tomorrow. His aide hastily objected, saying he already had arrangements for tomorrow. The Emperor replied with a smile that if Chizia didn't want him to go mad again, it would be best to clear that time. Hearing this, the aide assumed the Emperor was going to the guild again, but the Emperor's statement that he would be resting for the entire day took Chizia by surprise, needing to know the exact time. To appease his aide, the ruler promised to complete all current affairs on time and buy some delicious treats on his way back. The Emperor's tactic worked perfectly, and a noticeably better-spirited Chizia asked Yinning to return as early as possible. For several days, the Emperor hadn't been able to sleep properly, all his thoughts revolving around Alice, the girl who so easily brought him peace and beside whom he slept so soundly. The nature of Alice's abilities was incomprehensible to Yinning, but when he was near her, his anxiety vanished as if by magic. A knight appeared seemingly out of nowhere, summoned by the Emperor. The ruler ordered the knight to contact the Bryce family. The Baron's daughter had caught Yinning's attention during the ball, as she was the only one who helped the fainted girl, leading him to believe she possessed some kind of power. Hearing this, Chizia inquired about the Emperor's intentions towards the girl. The ruler himself didn't yet know the answer to this question, but many people needed healing abilities, including himself. Then, Yinning inquired about the identity of the girl he had tried to strangle, but May apologized, saying he hadn't found any information yet. The Emperor smiled, recalling the incident, as the girl had injected him with the medicine without any fear or hesitation, and he wanted to see her again. The next morning, Lena headed to the meeting place with the Emperor. Alice waited for Yinning by the fountain. Standing alone, Lena began to think about what they would do. She considered different options and regretted not asking Rosella where they sold delicious food when she had the chance. While the girl was lost in thought, children were happily running and playing around the fountain, but suddenly one of them accidentally pushed Lena. Alice almost fell into the water, but Yinning caught her just in time. Yinning saved the girl, and she, in turn, saved the child from falling. Alice wanted to thank Yinning, but noticing that he didn't look well, she became worried. The Emperor tried to calm the girl down, saying that everything was fine, just a bit of overexertion, and he wanted to spend time together. Yinning's words didn't make Alice feel any better, and she still wanted to send him back so he could rest properly. But Lena found it difficult to resist the Emperor's smile, confused and unsure of what to do. While the girl was bewildered, Yinning asked where they should go. Seeing the enthusiastic Emperor, Lena decided to put aside her worries, figuring she could help him by absorbing nightmares if his condition suddenly worsened. Yinning kindly replied that he just wanted to take a walk. Seeing Yinning's bright smile, Alice realized he longed for a walk after so long and suggested he run her errands. Because of the festival, the streets were crowded, making it difficult to navigate through the throngs of people, with almost every passerby bumping into Alice. Noticing this, Yinning took Alice's hand to avoid getting separated. Yinning looked directly into the girl's eyes, squeezed her hand tightly, and they continued on their way. Lena could hardly imagine such a scene even in her dreams. Yinning and Alice entered the retail district. It was a high-end store with quite expensive prices. The girl wanted to buy Stella a scarf to replace the one she received on the day of the ball, but when she saw the price, she was speechless. No matter how painful it was to spend money on the scarf, Lena decided to buy 2 such scarves. Because although Stella had given her the scarf, Ka was also present at the time, and the girl didn't know who the scarf actually belonged to. Yinning decided to ask Alice if she was buying the scarves as a gift. Lena replied that yes, they were gifts for the people who had helped her. Then the Emperor asked the next question, who these people were, and if he knew them. Although it seemed like an interrogation, the girl calmly answered the question, saying that as far as she knew. Yinning knew them, and his next question came quickly. He asked Alice if she was close to these people. The girl, caught off guard by the question, replied with some confusion that she didn't see them often. The Emperor pressed further, wanting to confirm if this meant she was closer to him than to them. Only after receiving an affirmative answer did he seem to relax. As they left the shop, the girl continued to ponder his questions about their relationship. Compared to her past life, their communication was certainly better now. But they weren't that close. As they stepped outside, Yinning offered his hand to Alice once more. Alice still wasn't sure what to make of their relationship, but she took his hand nonetheless. They continued walking hand in hand. The Emperor stopped abruptly, causing Alice to bump into him. Confused, she asked him why he had stopped so suddenly. The Emperor was staring intently at something. It was a candy shop. The girl remembered Yinning saying he didn't like sweets when they first met, but seeing the look of interest on his face, she decided to ask again if he liked them. Yes, I do, he replied, the expression on his face giving Alice pause. For a moment, Lena vividly recalled the time Yinning had given her cookies, claiming he didn't enjoy sweets. Seeing the childlike eagerness in his eyes as he gazed at the display case now was almost unbelievable. Perhaps, she thought, he had been lying back then. Then suddenly, the Emperor was overcome with discomfort, the dark aura enveloping him once more. The girl urged them to find a place to rest, but Yinning was already struggling to move. Reaching a bench, Yinning lay down with his head in Alice's lap to recover. Lena gently pressed her lips to his hand. Using her ability, his breathing returned to normal and his temperature cooled. The man apologized, feeling guilty for ruining their walk, but the girl reassured him with a smile. It's all right. It's not your fault, Yinning. He still remembered Alice's theory about believing in miracles, thinking that his lack of improvement stemmed from his weak faith. But with her by his side, he truly felt better. Lena comforted him, saying that the most important thing was to never give up and not to lose heart. To lighten the mood, Alice promised that, in time, he would get better. Though their relationship had begun with lies, now she spoke the truth. As she said these words, guilt gnawed at her, for the root of everything was her own desire to live a long life. Suddenly, Yinning spoke of his brother falling into a coma, implying that the same might happen to him. Alice immediately realized he was referring to Trina Schubert. Lena desperately wanted to comfort him, but the words caught in her throat. Everything will be all right was a difficult phrase to utter. Suddenly, Yinning declared that he would rather collapse like his brother and never wake up. He believed himself to be a monster, or rather, that a monster much like him resided within his body. Alice couldn't promise that everything would be all right. Everything is under control now, Lena reassured him. Everything is okay. You are alive now. You're not a monster. You're just Yinning. Touched by her words, the Emperor continued to gaze at her intently. After a long silence, Yinning asked Alice if she had ever attended a ball at the Imperial Palace. Startled by the sudden question, the girl feigned ignorance, claiming she had never been to a ball. Upon hearing her reply, the Emperor clarified his question, stating that he seemed to have seen her at a ball. In a calm voice, the girl suggested that perhaps there was someone who looked very much like her. The Emperor added that the stranger possessed the same aura as her, and that she resembled her so strongly that he yearned to see her again. Yinning's words made the girl's heart race. To change the subject, Alice decided to inquire about the ball, but the Emperor simply replied that it was boring. He then added, however, that there was someone there who had caught his interest. Faced with the girl's curiosity, Yinning confessed that during the ball, he had only watched her. Based on the novel's plot, Lena naturally assumed they were talking about Stella. Perhaps Alice thought it was love at first sight. The more she thought about it, the worse she felt. Aware of her own thoughts, the girl grew confused, unable to understand the nature of her feelings. Furthermore, according to the plot, the Emperor was obsessed with Stella. Noticing Alice's strange expression, Yinning grew concerned. Lena replied that everything was fine and began to reason with herself, trying to convince herself that her low spirits stemmed from the fact that if Yinning spent a lot of time meeting with Stella, she wouldn't have time to absorb his nightmares, and everyone around the Emperor could be hurt. The worried Emperor asked Alice again if everything was all right. The girl immediately replied yes, and after the conversation, they continued their walk. After a while, Alice and Yinning parted ways, and Alice was left alone. Alice quickly noticed that the guild members were following her. Rosella pretended that they had just been discovered, and in response to the girl's question, said that they had been following them ever since Yinning took her hand. The guild master justified herself by saying that they were just worried, but this did not convince the girl. Knowing Rosella, she guessed that she was just bored. The guild master didn't want to admit it, but Lena was sure that this was just a way for her to amuse herself. Suddenly, Lena fell silent. She saw a familiar female figure. The girl was stunned. Someone nearby continued to call out to Alice, but the Alice being called was not Lena, and a man with the same name as her was very close to the girl. Her mother was actually still alive. She slowly disappeared into the crowd. A few days later, at the Imperial Palace, Stella Bryce appeared before the Emperor. The Emperor looked at the girl and the man nearby with displeasure. Kyle stood behind Stella, even though the Emperor hadn't summoned him. Kyle introduced himself as the young lady's guard. Yinning then asked with displeasure if they really thought he would harm the lady, to which he received an immediate negative response. Only one seat was prepared in the throne room, as the Emperor was only expecting the girl. But it didn't matter. The knight was satisfied with his position by the young mistress's side. The stern Emperor paid no mind to the romantic atmosphere surrounding the two. After the pleasantries, the ruler immediately got down to business. He said the reason he summoned Stella was because of her healing abilities. The Emperor also added that he wanted to request assistance. The gloomy ruler's words greatly surprised the girl. Kyle decided to clarify whether it was a request or a command. The third party's unauthorized intervention in Yinning's private conversation with the lady angered the ruler, and he sternly rebuked the knight. However, the knight didn't avert his gaze. He didn't seem afraid. Noticing this, Yinning grinned and answered the previous question, saying it depended on their response. Simply put, if the girl answered affirmatively, it would be a request. If negatively, it would be a command. Then Stella decided to ask what the request was specifically. The Emperor had 2 requests in total. First, all information had to be kept confidential. Second, the girl had to use her healing abilities on him. Hearing this, Kyle became worried, but Stella calmed him down. The young man and woman continued to look at each other in confusion, while the Emperor, exhausted by nightmares, was irritated by this scene. After requesting permission from the ruler, the girl stood up and approached the Emperor to use her abilities. Standing directly in front of the Emperor, the girl directed her power towards him. Suddenly, Yinning was enveloped in a black aura once more.